Tēnā koutou katoa, ko ahu te komihana matatapu, ko Michael Webster aho. Kia ora, I'm Michael Webster, Aotearoa New Zealand's Privacy Commissioner, and welcome to Privacy Week 2023. Alongside Privacy Week, this year marks 30 years since the Privacy Act was implemented. And to celebrate, my office has organised 20 free webinars over 5 days and covering a wide range of subject areas. These seminars are designed to educate and inform us all and include discussions with leading individuals and organisations about how digital transformation of our society impacts privacy. We have seminars for everyone, no matter where you are on your professional privacy journey. I'm delighted to welcome you all to 2023's Privacy Week and excited to kick it off by sharing some thoughts I have about the current state of play with privacy in Aotearoa, New Zealand. People often say to me, how will you know whether you're doing a good job as Privacy Commissioner? Or what will have changed if my office is succeeding in its role? My answer is that I will know we have made the needed change in approach and culture when privacy is treated as a core focus for agencies, as much as health and safety is, or good financial reporting, or achievement of key financial and non-financial targets. I want to see it as a core focus because I believe that that will contribute to 3 desirable outcomes. I want to ensure privacy is a core focus for agencies in order to first protect the privacy of individuals. Second, to enable agencies to achieve their own objectives. And third, to safeguard a free and democratic society. Of course, getting to this point will require effort across a number of fronts. So my office will be focusing on achieving 4 objectives over the medium term. We will engage and empower people and communities that are more vulnerable to serious privacy harm. We will set clear expectations to provide agencies with greater certainty about their responsibilities. We will work in partnership with Māori to take a te ao Māori perspective on privacy. And we will promptly use our full range of investigation and compliance powers as necessary to hold agencies accountable for serious privacy harm. And if we do make a good go of achieving these objectives, we should see in New Zealand a future where individuals are more confident, for good reason, that their privacy is protected. Agencies can better achieve their own objectives through respecting the privacy rights of New Zealanders. And the right to privacy and the protection of personal information is valued in New Zealand. Now that's all very well and good, but where are we at today? What is the data telling us? What are survey results telling us? Well, recently Internet New Zealand released a survey on New Zealanders' attitudes to the internet. One of the top concerns was threats to privacy. Their results show that in the past 12 months, 2/3 of New Zealanders have chosen not to use at least one online service because of security or privacy concerns. Our own research shows that 3 out of 5 New Zealanders still report concern about businesses sharing their personal information without their permission. Of course, the emergence of COVID-19 has accelerated the trend of us living more online. There's been a 52% increase in online shopping since 2019, for example. But at the same time, our research also tells us 3 in 5 people would likely consider changing providers if they heard they had poor privacy and security practices. And are people quietly accepting the status quo? No, they are not. For example, complaints and queries about access requests to see the personal information an agency holds on an individual are up 30%. And my office reporting on breach notification trends won't be very reassuring for New Zealanders either. We have seen a 41% increase in notifications between the 2021-22 year and the 2022-23 year. There has, over the last year, been ongoing media coverage in New Zealand of cybersecurity issues, and major stories about social media monitoring and tracking. We consider that this is having an impact on the way people think about who they give their information to and, once given, how it is being looked after. And the statistics do bear that out. Almost half of New Zealanders say they would avoid doing something on the internet due to concerns about their online activity being tracked. So lots of food for thought there. New Zealanders are clearly not entirely convinced that their personal information is being protected and respected by the public and private sector organisations that hold it. Given this picture, my office is continuing to spend a lot of time responding to government policy proposals and proposed initiatives by private sector agencies that have privacy implications. For a long time there, our focus was very much on ensuring privacy was kept front of mind during the response to COVID-19. Now, other important and topical and complex issues are keeping us busy. And one I would like to highlight is the work we have been doing on biometrics. We have followed up on a position paper we issued earlier on biometrics by releasing a consultation paper on privacy regulation of biometrics as part of a review of existing regulation and testing whether more needs to be done to protect New Zealanders' privacy. Many submitters broadly agreed with the office's concerns about biometrics. Biometric information is sensitive information, which is unique to the individual and difficult to change, so it needs careful protection. Other concerns focus on risks of discriminatory impacts from the use of biometrics. Most submitters thought some further regulatory intervention, such as a code or guidance, would be helpful and would provide greater certainty for regulated agencies and better privacy protection for you and me. It's fair to say that there were mixed views on the most appropriate type of intervention, but what was clear is that something more needs to be done. The use of biometrics is growing and diversifying, and we want to ensure New Zealanders and New Zealand businesses can harness the benefits of this technology, but also be protected from potential harm. What happens next is a round of targeted engagement with agencies and people who are interested in this field about what further regulation might look like. We will be actively encouraging the public to take part in the consultation period because the use of biometric information will affect us all. Advances in technology can offer great benefits, but it is important the benefits are enabled for all and the public are safeguarded against risk. In terms of government policy initiatives that have implications for individuals' privacy and the collection and use of their personal information, a good example of that is the work being done right now on a consumer data right, or CDR. A CDR is a mechanism that requires data holders, such as banks or electricity retailers, to safely and securely share data with third parties, like financial services companies, following consent from the customer. Any data shared through the consumer data right is supposed to only take place with a person's informed consent and would be strictly used for the reasons agreed upon. The businesses and services wishing to receive this data would also have to meet a number of safeguards to ensure the information could be handled safely and securely. A CDR scheme will have significant implications for my office, and so we need to work with government to ensure New Zealand's privacy regulatory regime is reflected in any CDR scheme design and operation. While it's been 30 years since the first Privacy Act became law, the Act itself was updated in 2020, so it is, in a sense, a relatively new Act. However, from my perspective, there are still some features of a good privacy regulatory regime that are missing from it, or do need some updating. It is my view that further legislative changes are needed to ensure New Zealand's privacy law is fit for purpose in the digital age. Recent developments in international privacy law have several clear trends. Now, these include the strengthening of protections around children's privacy in the online world, the regulation of artificial intelligence and automated processing of personal information, increased penalties and compliance tools for privacy regulators, which appear to have been included with the primary purpose of incentivising good privacy practice, particularly in large multinational corporations, the key players in the digital age. Rules relating to the commercialisation of personal information and rights targeted at the unique capacity of the digital environment, such as the right to erasure. I do want to talk a little bit more about compliance and penalty regimes. I appreciate that this is not necessarily the favourite discussion topic of those agencies currently regulated under the Privacy Act. So just a reminder, the New Zealand Privacy Act does not contain a civil penalty regime, and the criminal offences in the Act have been described as being of limited practical use for enforcing serious breaches of privacy, such as data breaches. In contrast, following the significant data breaches experienced by Optus and Medibank in Australia, the government there moved quickly to significantly increase the civil penalties for privacy breaches. Australia increased the maximum civil penalty for serious or repeated interferences with privacy to the greater of $50 million, or 3 times the value of any benefit obtained from the conduct constituting the serious or repeated interference with privacy, or 30% of an entity's adjusted turnover in the relevant period. All of us would acknowledge that data breaches happen for a variety of reasons, and with a variety of factors at play. Compliance and penalty regimes do need to acknowledge that. Equally, the motivations underpinning how public and private agencies, large and small, deal with their privacy obligations are mixed. Some take those obligations seriously and don't need to be motivated by fear of punishment or sanction to spend precious time and money on building privacy protective systems and cultures. Others are willing to not make that investment and take the risk that a serious privacy breach won't occur, or if one does occur, the financial and reputational damage to the agency will be bearable. So it is the case that the motivations on agencies are mixed and they face conflicting pressures, all of which can be reflected in approaches to regulation and sanction. I've seen this usefully set out as regulating along a spectrum based on work done by an expert in environmental regulation and governance. The spectrum runs from champion to compliant to confused to careless to chancer to criminal. My office has seen examples of these behaviours, from the deliberate accessing of personal information from those not authorised to see it, to the misaddressed email, to the agency that knew its IT systems were not up to scratch but did nothing about them, and on it goes. The matching behavioural modification spectrum, designed to encourage improvement, runs from recognise and reward, to engage, to enable, to educate, to enforce, to using the full force of the law, including the criminal law. As many of you will know, it was in 2020 that the Privacy Act was amended to give my office an additional range of compliance and enforcement tools. We are starting to see the benefits of having additional compliance functions and a dedicated compliance and enforcement team. After 2 years of now being able to get into systemic issues, it's clear that our regulatory model is one based on high trust that expects that most agencies are complying. Concerningly, we are finding that in reality, the degree of privacy maturity is not as developed as we would have expected for legislation that has been in place for nearly 30 years now. Overall, the Office has not so far issued many formal compliance actions, with 2 compliance notices issued to date. We are noting positive compliance responses to lower-level actions such as draft compliance notices, compliance advice, requests for assurance, requests for information, and letters of concern. This means the need to move to more formal measures is reduced. It is also noticeable that agencies are engaging external experts to carry out important privacy breach investigations and are adopting the recommendations from those reviews. At this level, we are therefore seeing evidence of a willingness to comply when issues are raised. But there is always room for another tool in the regulatory toolbox, including one that can be used in the most serious of circumstances. I am certainly very interested in looking at the role that a financial penalty regime, consistent with New Zealand consumer law, could have in terms of punishing agencies for poor management of people's personal information. When you compare us to overseas privacy regulators, we are an outlier in not having a civil financial penalty regime. Such penalties could apply for negligent as well as deliberate breaches. For example, under Information Privacy Principle 5, agencies are meant to have safeguards in place that are reasonable in the circumstances to prevent loss, misuse, or disclosure of personal information. And as cyber attacks become more and more a feature of criminal activity, failures by agencies to take data retention and minimisation policies seriously will also attract more and more attention from regulators such as my office. Going forward, I will certainly keep advocating for financial sanction powers, similar to those provided for in the privacy legislation of regulators in like-minded countries. Technological development and the application of new technologies in such areas as marketing, law and order, service provision, and monitoring and surveillance continues to have significant implications for the right to privacy. Of course, I can't talk about the future of privacy in a world of rapidly advancing technology without referring to artificial intelligence, or AI platforms like ChatGPT. During Privacy Week, we have a number of sessions focused on AI. And as a privacy regulator, I'm not alone in thinking about and worrying about the impact that AI is and could have on the right to privacy. A recent survey of how governments around the world are trying to regulate AI tools noted that in Italy, they imposed a temporary ban on OpenAI's ChatGPT back in March after the National Data Protection Agency raised concerns over possible privacy violations. The European Data Protection Board decided to launch a dedicated task force on ChatGPT. The board said the goal of the task force is to foster cooperation and to exchange information on possible enforcement actions conducted by data protection authorities. The Office of the Privacy Commissioner of Canada has launched an investigation into the company that developed ChatGPT. The investigation into OpenAI, the operator of ChatGPT, was launched in response to a complaint alleging the collection, use, and disclosure of personal information was done without consent. In the UK, the Information Commissioner's Office has, for a while, been issuing and updating guidance on what they think is best practice for data protection compliant AI, and have recently issued a very readable and thoughtful piece on 8 questions that developers and agencies intending to use generative AI need to ask themselves. And of course, we saw recently that the tech giants of AI themselves raised the question of whether the world needs to push pause and consider its full potential and harm before moving on. And while we are sitting here, it's more than likely that there have been further developments in both the rollout of the technology and in the response from privacy regulators. It is an incredibly fast-moving area. As I've already said publicly, the development of AI, like ChatGPT, offers great potential to make our lives easier, to drive improved productivity, and help us solve some of the problems facing society. But AI needs to serve the interests of humanity, which means also considering its privacy implications. The Privacy Act 2020 is technology neutral, giving everyone the same privacy rights and protections, whether their personal information is being recorded on paper, held digitally, collected by facial recognition technology, or by other means. In this sense, AI is just another new technology. However, as Privacy Commissioner, I know that privacy is precious, and how we protect that right is something I spend a lot of time thinking about. When people post their personal information online, I doubt they think about it being hoovered up by AIs and then used for commercial or other purposes. Transparency about how personal information is being collected and used is central to protecting privacy. And that's no different if agencies are using AI to do that. Whether personal information is publicly available or not, its collection and use is still subject to the Privacy Act. While it's on businesses to operate within the law, it of course pays for the public to upskill themselves and be savvy about what information they're posting and where. We know that criminals are becoming an even greater threat online because cybersecurity breaches are increasing and result in costly hacks of personal information. AI can be used to supercharge these criminals, leading to more privacy breaches and making it even harder for cybersecurity systems to protect your information, or for post-breach measures such as injunctions to protect stolen data that criminals may make available online. Powerful AI can aggregate data to a much greater degree, much more swiftly than humans can, meaning AI can potentially identify people that would otherwise not be identifiable through more time-intensive methods. Even the seemingly benign online interactions could reveal more about you than you ever intended. I have a lot of questions about this new technology, probably more than I currently have answers for. How does AI created and deployed in the US and accessible across the world intend to comply with the privacy laws of other countries? Who ensures that ChatGPT is respecting Māori culture and the sensitivities and nuances around using Māori data? How do we plan and think about rights without sounding worst-case scenario? While the Privacy Act 2020 already applies to AI, the issues surrounding it could potentially profoundly challenge how we protect privacy in New Zealand and across the world. Laws and regulations should be consistent with fundamental constitutional principles and reflect long-standing rights and values. As a society, we need to have an important conversation about what we want AI to do and what limitations are necessary to ensure our rights are protected. This conversation is becoming more urgent as private developers release more advanced and competing AIs, and it will require a collective response from public sector and private businesses. In the meantime, my sense is that regulators, domestically and internationally, need to come together to determine how best to protect our rights and create the space for this conversation to happen. I am encouraging those public sector agencies with an interest in AI to share what work they have underway and planned, and to consider options for collaboration, with the aim of embedding a coordinated effort across the public sector focused on ensuring the use of AI is regulated in a privacy-protective way. I'm conscious that today I've spent a little bit of time talking about what my office intends to achieve over the medium term, what some of you would fairly describe as corporate speak. But I did that because I want you to hold me and my office accountable for doing the things I have talked about and for measuring the results to see if we did achieve the outcomes we were seeking to achieve. I know that all sounds very earnest, but of course, this isn't a game. My privacy, your privacy, has been and will continue to be under threat. We all live in what has become an increasingly fractious and fractured world, a world where personal data has significant value, and that is seeing governments and businesses reach for solutions that have both known and unknown consequences for privacy. Privacy regulators and advocates are in their own way working to maintain our human rights frameworks, our ability as citizens to make our own decisions as to what we want to keep private, to exercise our own agency, gives us the space and freedom to exercise our other civil and political rights, the reasons behind why our voting is held by secret ballot, what we decide to share about ourselves when seeking a rental property or a job, the views we express to only those we trust to share them with, the groups or causes we belong to, and so it goes on. If our citizens lose their own agency over their personal information, they risk losing more than that. They open themselves up to being controlled. They open themselves up to various life choices being unfairly constrained. The Privacy Act regulates agencies, and agencies have the ability to make a real difference in ensuring privacy is both respected and protected. But what about us? Well, in a world of rapid technological developments, an increasing focus on the collection and use of data to inform the design and operation of government programs, and the monetisation of personal information, there are at least two important things that those of us who care about privacy need to do. First, we need to work at opening the eyes of those in public and private sector organisations as to the degree of concern that there is out there about protecting the right to privacy. And second, we need to work with them to strengthen their approach to carrying out their functions within a framework that demonstrates a strong awareness of that right to privacy. Kia ora, thank you.